Before I get started, can I get a show of hands? How many of you have traveled on Airbnb before? That's awesome. Great, so that's at least half of you, so awesome. For those of you that, we'll give you Great, we'll figure that out afterwards. So for those of you that haven't heard about Airbnb, we are a community marketplace. We are a community marketplace that allows people to list and book unique accommodations all over the world. Just yesterday, we actually released a summer travel report.
Test.
Hello. Great, so just yesterday we released a summer travel report and announced that we've had over 17 million guests who stayed on Airbnb this year. Just 5 years ago, in 2010, that number was 47,000 people. And so over the course of 5 years, we've grown 353 times. That's really phenomenal to think about, and actually a very humbling feeling for someone who's working at the company. So I'm sure some of you might be wondering, like, how did Airbnb get to where we are today? Now, I'm not going to focus on answering this question in my presentation, but just to briefly touch on it, the main reason why Airbnb is able to grow to our current reach is because the timing is right. Because of the technological advancements, human beings are traveling more than ever before. Because of technological advancements, human beings are more connected than ever before through the internet, and we also trust the internet a lot more than we used to be. All of these three conditions are none of Airbnb's doing, is just that we're in the right business in the right time. So I want you to keep that in the back of your head and put things into perspective as I go into the more details of how we localize our product. So today, in the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to talk you through 8 dilemmas of product localization. These are all questions that we've struggled with in the past year or so, and I trust that you will also face them in the near future if you ever bring your service into a new market. So number 1, doing or understanding. Now, when you've made a decision to enter a new market, usually the first question that you would ask is, what should we do? You're going to be eager to tell the world that you're entering a new market. You're probably going to have promotions, press releases, launch parties, and stuff like that. But I would actually challenge you to take a step back and ask yourselves, how much do you know about your existing users? Who are they? How did they hear about you? Why do they use your service as opposed to anyone else in the market? Now, these are all important questions because I guarantee you that the early adopters in your new market is going to look very much like users in your home base. So for Airbnb, we have tried to figure these out in a number of ways. And the easier way is to simply ask. So this here is a sign-up survey that we put out after people sign up, and we just asked them, how did you hear about Airbnb? And we found that most people actually hear about us from a friend or their family member. And for us, we're actually rather lucky because users give us information without us intentionally asking about it. So here you see people's user profiles, and they actually fill them out in great details, telling us who they are, where they study, and why they use Airbnb. So this here is an analysis that we did by analyzing certain keywords in the user profile, and it's not showing up very clearly, but you can see that there are professions like teachers, students, designer, artist, and so on. And we found that actually across a lot of our Asian countries, the early adopters are, if you see like the deep green, it would be like students. It would be students. So then when we enter a new market, these are the group of people that we first approach as we look for our first 100 or 1,000 users. In the same way, we also have these reviews that people leave us. And we did a similar analysis and tried looking for keywords that people mention in their reviews and try to figure out, hey, why do people use Airbnb? Keywords like hosts, friendly, clean, convenient, and so on. And we found that the word host is actually mentioned the most in reviews. And so this tells me that when we enter a new market, this is what distinguishes Airbnb from everyone else, the idea of having a host. So in short, it's really, really important for you to understand your existing users before you go into a new market. And I assume that the reason why you're going into a new market is that you already have a fairly strong, successful user base in your home base. And so, yeah, be sure to do a lot of work there. Cool, number 2, essential or good to have. Now, like I said, when you enter a new market, it's only natural for you to be really eager to do something cool and to let people know that, hey, like, I'm here. For us, the first thing that we did when we entered China is to add Weibo as a sign-up method in the market. Now, as most of you would know, Facebook is blocked in China, and so it only makes sense that we add Weibo as an alternative sign-up or sign-in method. But in retrospect, I would argue that this adding a new sign-up method is actually not our top priority, because later in some of our user research trip on the ground, we found that this is actually what our website looked like to a lot of our users. So what happened was, in this part of the world, in China, Korea, Japan, a lot of users are still using Windows machines and they use old versions of Internet Explorer. And our site was actually having a lot of errors with being loaded in those browsers. So this here is a host looking at our front page, seeing nothing but just huge X's. This here is another user that we visited in Tokyo, and as you can see, this is our search results page, but neither the map nor the photos are showing up. As embarrassing as it is to admit, it is very important for you to actually test your product and make sure that it works before you do anything else. So since then, we've focused a lot more of our energy on making sure that our product at least function as well as in our newer market as our more mature markets. And this here is one of the projects that we worked on recently. So like I mentioned, Google is blocked in China. And so some of the things that we take for granted outside of China or say in the US is not available in China. So on the left, you see this is a predictive search API that Google provides. But since it doesn't work in China, we built an in-house solution. And so now when you type in a certain location, we'll give you a list of suggestions as well. Number 3, top or bottom of funnel. Another big question that we've struggled with is whether we should drive more traffic to the site or to improve conversion first. Now, the way I think about it is like a bow tie. Imagine with me that the x-axis from your left to right is the user journey from awareness to consideration to decision, and the y-axis is the gap between what's considered effective in the local market and what's effective in your home base or in the global market. Now, the beginning is more about making a good impression, about capturing people's attention, and the end is more practical, about how easily and smoothly people can use your product. So in Airbnb's case, we know that when we enter a new market, we need local experts to run things like search engine marketing and search engine optimization because of how different the traffic sources are distributed. In China, there's Baidu and Qihoo, and in Korea, there's Naver. So we need experts doing that. On the other hand, we also know that we need to run local marketing campaigns to capture people's attention. So this one here is one that we did recently. And we partnered with Korean megastar G-Dragon to turn his dance studio into an Airbnb listing and for him to host like 5 lucky fans in that listing. We've also localized a lot of our tutorial videos. And this one here is one that just explains how Airbnb works. And as you can see, it's one that is completely localized from the annotations, to the screenshots, to the actress, and voiceover, and so on. Now, in terms of bottom of funnel, when we benchmarked our numbers against, say, the US and Europe, we realized that users in Asia are having a particularly hard time in 2 parts of the funnel, payment and verification. Well, payment is self-explanatory, but verification is a step that we require hosts and guests to go through to authenticate their identity, to make sure that they are a real person and they're safe to our community. Now, when we designed this flow, it is apparent that it's skewed towards users in the Western world because the options that you're given to authenticate yourself are things like Facebook and LinkedIn, Gmail, and things like driver's license and so on. And so it's no wonder that users in Asia are having a hard time going through these steps because they simply don't have these options. So now we're trying really hard to find alternative service providers to improve this flow. But again, these are things that you need to consider when you enter a new market. Can users smoothly go through your product? And it's very important for you to first improve performance near the end of the funnel because you don't want to spend a ton of money driving traffic to the site only to find out that they can't convert near the end. Number 4, experiment or gut. Now at Airbnb, we run product like a science. We A/B test everything, and we make decisions that are data-driven, and we test everything from a button color to the button size to something bigger like a new navigation bar or a new landing page and so on. When we first tried to tackle the usability issue in China, again, we realized that, hey, like the Google Maps not loading in China. So we decided, as a short-term solution, why don't we just remove the map? But deep inside, we know that not having a map is a poor user experience. And so what we did was we used Canada as a test market, and we removed the map for 50% of our traffic in Canada for like a few weeks. What we then found was that for the half of the traffic that didn't see the map, the number of bookings actually dropped by 10%. And so afterwards, we realized that, hey, like, having a map is actually 10% of more opportunity. And so we decided to actually put in the work and look for an alternative service provider. This here is what you see today on our search results page if you access it from China. And we have found an alternative solution called OpenStreetMap that loads fairly okay, but it's still in English. So we're still looking for better solutions. Now today, experimentation is done very sophisticated at Airbnb, and for each experiment, we're given a long list of metrics to track, and we can see how the experiment is impacting down to the very details of the funnel and any metric that you care about, basically. But then experimentation also has its limitations. The first limitation is that has to do with sample quality. Now, experimentation is set up very scientifically, but it assumes that the sample that you select for the experiment is representative of all of your users currently and your users to come. So when you're just starting out, say in a new market, your user base, the demographic of your user base actually changed quite drastically from time to time. And so the validity of the experiment will likely expire quite quickly in weeks or months when the new user that comes through the door is very different from the one that came in 3-4 months ago. So the sample quality is one that you have to consider. The second limitation has to do with sample size. When we run global experiments at Airbnb, it usually takes 2 weeks to a month for us to get statistically significant results. But when we run regionally specific or country-specific experiments, it then becomes really, really hard for us to get results because of how small the sample is. So then we usually have to struggle between finding the most scientific and logical and objective decision, as well as just making gut feeling decisions, because we can't afford to wait for 6 months for a decision to be made based on the experiment, especially since you want to be fast and nimble when you first started. So in most cases, even if you don't see, say, incremental improvements at the bottom of funnel, sales numbers, for instance, if you see higher user engagement at the top of funnel, more signups, more people browsing your site, more people just engaging with your site, this is already good signals that you should move forward with this idea. Number 5, incremental or makeover. When you're designing an experiment, one of the main decisions that you'll have to make is whether you're going to completely redesign something or whether you're just making some small changes here and there. Now, both approaches have its pros and cons, but based on our experience of working with a smaller user base of a region, oftentimes making incremental changes wouldn't result in any measurable difference. And here are a few examples. So here, when we rebranded about a year ago, we decided, hey, why don't we test switching out the top carousel photos on the front page to feature Asian faces instead of the Western faces that we show on our global site. And we've run this experiment for a couple months, and in the end, we didn't see any results because it's kind of a small experiment. The change is not apparent. And similarly, we've tried changing the title and subtitle that you see on the front page, and again, these copy changes didn't really make a difference. Similarly, this is a trust banner that we put on the front page on our Chinese site, and we explain to people that, hey, we're trustworthy because we support all these local services, and yet it didn't make any impact in terms of our main metrics. But we did roll this out to 100% of users in the end because we feel that it wouldn't hurt. But then what happens is that when you're just getting started and have a small user base, you shouldn't rely on experiments to inform your decisions. So again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you shouldn't make changes at all. Small changes that make sense to you should always be made, but again, don't rely on experiments. And when you do want to experiment with something, try something like more drastic. So this here is our attempt at redesigning the front page. The left or your right is the existing version, and on your on your right is the new version, and on your left is the existing version. And as you can see, we added things like the how it works section, showcasing our value propositions. We added a banner that better attracts people to sign up. And we're still testing it, but in either way, you want to have bolder and bigger changes when you're just getting started with experimentation. Also, doing things that you've never done before is always a good idea. So at Airbnb, we usually engage users with emails, but we thought, hey, like in Asia, a lot more users are engaged with push notifications and SMS, and we tried doing that. It is an experiment as well. Number 6, user experience or technology. Now, often when you enter a new market, the best thing that you can do is to provide really, really good service to your users. And what it means is that you would probably be more approachable to users in this new market than you are to your home base or users anywhere else. So this here is our front page, the bottom of our front page, and on the Japanese site, we actually feature our phone number very clearly at the very bottom. But on the global page, you wouldn't see that. Similarly, business travel is a new product that we put out recently, and there's a very prominent button for you to just email us. And this is us wanting to hear from users, earlier users, as they try out the product. Now, when we were actually deciding whether or not to put out our phone number on the front page for Japan, Korea, and China, there was somewhat of a discussion within the company thinking that, hey, like, what if we can't handle the volume if we just open the floodgate? And this is a very legitimate concern, but then when you're just starting out, always start with ideal user experience and work backwards. When Airbnb started like 7 or 8 years ago, our 3 founders realized that one of the biggest issues was that the photos that our hosts are uploading are really, really terrible. I mean, back then we don't have fancy phones like we have today, and so they just upload really terrible photos. And what they did was they flew out to New York, they took a professional camera and went door to door and took like pictures of hundreds of listings and just uploaded them. When they made the decision, they didn't start by worrying about, hey, like, how are we going to scale this? How are we going to hire photographers in a lot of different markets? How are we going to schedule it? How are we going to automate it? They started with the best user experience that they want to provide for users, and then when it's successful, they worry about the rest. And today, we do have an automated tool that allows hosts to request for photography service, and it would automatically assign it to a photographer closest to their location. And it deals with everything from payment and so on. It's all automated. But again, they didn't start with that. So when you're pursuing improvements for your service or for a website, always start with the ideal user experience that you want. Because after all, if you're not doing things that don't scale in the beginning, when your user base is still considerably small, when else are you going to do it? When it comes to product, we also carry a similar mindset when we run experiments. This here is one of our attempts to localize a landing page for traffic coming in from like paid channels. So people searching for accommodation on Google or Baidu and so on. And we wanted to try landing them on a page that's more educational and informative, that contains things like reviews in their local language rather than just dropping them onto our search results page immediately. Now, the building of this page involved quite a bit of manual work because we had to pick out the reviews that you see on the right side. And we did talk about, hey, like, how are we going to automate it in the future? How are we going to scale to more markets? But in the end, we decided to just roll it out to 10 countries first and put in the manual work because we're more eager to find out whether it would work or not. And now that it's going to work, and now that we've seen positive results from it, we're now thinking about how to like scale it. So again, really don't worry about scaling in the beginning, worry about the user experience. Number 7, to fork or not to fork. Now, making a decision of whether or not to build a new feature for a specific region is not one that's as simple as a one-off decision. Because if you're going to deviate from the core product, it's actually more like a long-term commitment. Think about it this way. The new feature that you build for this new market may be better than the current version, the main product at this point in time, but then your core product is also going to improve. So for us, we're actually just a very small team of 3 to 4 engineers, and for us to think that we can maintain the improvement of this new feature at a pace that's better than our global product sometimes is a bit hard to imagine. Like our global product has 300-400 people working on it at one time, and we're just a few people. So when you think about whether or not to build this, think longer term and think about the implications. On a more practical side, deviating from source code, deviating from the core product also means that you will likely face a lot of situations where your feature is broken because the original code, the source code, is changed. So this year is a very simple experiment that we ran recently. We decided that, hey, because, as mentioned, verification is a step that people have trouble going through, why don't we just add an info box and direct people to contact us if they're facing an issue? What happened was that link that you see there in the bluish green box got broken a few times because the source code of our contact us mechanism was changed a few times, and we didn't know that it happened. And again, it's a very simple change that we made, but we ended up spending more time fixing it than making it in the first place. Number 8, one-time or reusable. So as a local team, we sit with the local office in Singapore, and we often get approached many times for a lot of different product requests. And one of the ways that we try to prioritize our efforts is through asking this question, whether it's a one-time request or whether it's a reusable tool that we can build. In China, this is a marketing campaign that we ran with a boutique design firm, design brand called Dongliang, and 8 of their designers went on a trip, and they have videos to showcase and so on. And when the local team approached us, we decided not to build the mini site on our own and instead outsource it because we feel that this is not something that we can build into a tool and for other markets to benefit from it. Instead, we have built tools like this one where this is a promotional landing page where local teams can just go out and source different promotional deals, like this one is a credit card discount, and they can easily use our backend tool and customize this page without any engineering help. This here again is another tool that we've built. It looks very much like our listing details page, but it's something that we call Night Ad, which allows people to run campaigns like the one that I talked to you guys about, the G-Dragon campaign, that allows people to kind of stay at really unique spaces. And in Malaysia, we also ran a Night Ad event where people stayed at the F1 arena during the race. And we've also had one in Singapore recently where people got to stay at the Esplanade for the National Day. So when you think about building tools for specific markets, always think about how useful it is for other people as well. And this doesn't just apply to building tools like these. It also applies to when you're integrating with a payments provider, payment processor. Always consider how well it supports your potential new markets. Cool. So I've gone through 8 points, and that's what I have for you today. So in summary, when you're thinking about localization, thinking about entering a new market, there are 3 points that I want to bring out. Number 1, don't rush it. Try to understand your existing users as much as possible before moving on. Number 2, before even making any improvements, make sure that you test your site, your apps, whatever it is, very thoroughly and make sure that it works. Fix all the bugs and make sure that at least it works as smoothly as it would anywhere else in the world. And finally, Be as logical and scientific as possible, but be bold and willing to take risks. Because earlier on in your company's stage is when you can take these risks and not when you're like really, really big. So thank you very much for listening. I am more than happy to take your questions when you see me outside or just roaming around in the next couple of days. And yeah, thanks again.